am a 100% free-to-play player here in Raidshadowlegends, and today I've been requested to check out a new code that new players can actually download. And so let us get right into it. Let's check out if this code is actually going to be good, especially to the free-to-play community. We're going to see how good those champions are, and in the end, I'm going to give you guys my opinion if this code is actually going to be worth it. Now, the first champion that you will be getting, which is a legendary, is going to be from the Skinwalkers faction, and it's going to be this panda right here. On his A1, he has a pretty much 100% booked out chance of landing a decreased speed. The decreased speed will turn into an AoE if the initial target is under 2 or more debuffs. Then he also places a negative debuff, which is going to be a sleep on himself, and it cannot be blocked or resisted. On the A1 alone, you can see it's quite interesting already, and when we move on to the A2, he has an AoE, and before he attacks, he actually places a massive shield, which is 30% of this champion's max HP, and also increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. His base HP is quite high already, which means you can actually get a very big shield from this guy, and after attacking, he has a 100% chance booked out of decreasing the duration of all enemy buffs by 1 turn, even if this is a weak hit. Which means it doesn't matter, he is going to decrease the enemy's buff as long as you have enough accuracy. Also increases the value of any shield buffs on all allies by 3% for each enemy buff that had its duration decreased by this skill. So yes, this is actually very good. He can get a massive shield from this guy, and on the last part of his skill, places a sleep debuff on this champion for 1 turn, and this debuff again cannot be blocked or resisted just like the A1. On the A3, we have targets an enemy, but he will first place an increased accuracy and increased attack on all allies, and then he also has a pretty much 100% booked out chance of placing Enfeeble and decreased accuracy on all enemies for 2 turns. The Enfeeble debuff cannot be placed on bosses, of course, and has a 75% chance of placing a big version of decreased attack on bosses for 2 turns instead. And of course, like any other skill, he is going to place a sleep on himself. And as you can see, this skill is actually quite useful, especially if you're going to be fighting in PvP, because if you guys didn't know, Enfeeble forces the enemy to land a weak hit no matter how much crit rate they actually have, or even if they're positive affinity. Then on his passive, he has a 75% chance of transferring any debuffs placed on an ally to this champion while they are under sleep debuff, which is useful, and of course you cannot transfer those ridiculous debuffs here. At the start of this champion's turn, removes any sleep debuffs from this champion, and an active effect transfers all debuffs from this champion to the enemy with the highest resistance if a sleep debuff was removed. So pretty much, this is a very useful passive because again, he puts himself to sleep all the time. So the more debuffs this guy actually has, the worse it is going to for you guys, especially if your champion is very important as a support with high res, because this effect cannot actually be resisted or blocked. So as you can see, this guy can be actually quite good for some niche uses in PvP. However, I'm going to just give you guys this verdict right now. Of course, he's going to come along with some other epics. Don't you guys worry. But honestly, as a free-to-play player who takes this game quite seriously, Bamboo's 4-Leaf is such an absolutely garbage champion. I mean, you can literally see from the reviews. It's a trash champion for PvE. He can be useful for some sort of PvP cheese comps. But the problem is, there are a lot of strong PvP champions anyway, and you're not going to be using this champion up until your late game, because if you want to participate in Arena, you have to be late game. Which means Bamboo's 4-Leaf is probably the worst legendary you can actually start off with in Raidshadowlegends. So I highly recommend staying away from this garbage champion. I would never use it honestly unless you're trying to make some sort of fun challenge. But honestly, he is just such a garbage champion, guys. Don't use him. Next champion from the code is going to be Vergis. Now, Vergis, however, is way better than Bamboo's 4-Leaf, and even the ratings agree with me. This guy is so much better than that garbage legendary champion. On his A1, he has a 40% chance, basically 50, of placing a big version of reflect damage buff on a random ally for 2 turns. It's a weird type of skill, but it could be quite useful. And then on the A2, this is everything here. It's on a 3-turn cooldown. You only need 1 book, which is insane. Places a continuous healing buff, increased speed buff, and reflect damage buff on a single ally. And then he also brings you the ally protection on all allies, and then an increased defense on himself. He brings 5 different buffs, but it's very weird. Like, they all go in different champions, so that's actually a big problem here. This is why he's not that OP. However, His passive right here is also on a 1-turn cooldown, so basically every time he takes his turn, this will proc. Places the shield buff on this champion equal to 10% of their max HP. And as you can see, he can also put that if he loses HP, which is really, really cool. And he also places a continuous heal buff on himself every single time he drops below 50%. So you can see right here already, this champion is not supposed to be a carry, but a ridiculously overpowered solo champion. And just like these these ratings are quite poor. This guy is very good at soloing specific dungeon bosses and can even be used on multiple Doom Tower bosses such as the Scarab King. This guy is really good for Scarab because he brings himself a lot of utility, which is why Vergis is actually very, very desired by some of the early game players, and he is also very good for clan boss since he brings you that ally protection. Next champion that you will be getting alongside those two champions is going to be Tagore. Now Tagore is of course going to be better than Bamboo's 4-leaf again. His A1 brings you an increased defense for the ally with the lowest HP. It is a double hitter, so can be quite useful for Fire Knight early game. And then on the A2, it is going to be an AoE with an AoE increased speed buff and then a nice heal for all allies based on 15% of this champion's max HP on a 3-turn cooldown. So this guy already brings so much utility. Not only does he actually deal a slight amount of damage to all enemies, he also brings you an increased speed with a nice heal. And this guy's base HP is pretty much up there with Bamboo's 4-leaf's base HP. And this is probably just going to be me saying that that champion is absolutely garbage. His A3 is an AoE revive with 30% HP. And he can also place a nice shield buff on all allies by 20% of this max champion's HP. This is only 10% less than the Panda's skill, however it is on a 5-turn cooldown. But as a bonus, we can actually have an AoE revive, so that's really good. And you can use this skill, by the way, if none of your allies are dead. And then on his passive, he has a damage reduction for allies with less than 50% HP by 10%. Even these ratings will agree, this guy is very good for every single dungeon, very good for every single place in the entire game actually. And he also has a nice 25% HP aura on all battles. And lastly, from the code, you get 3 epics, 1 legendary. That next and last epic is going to be a Lizardman, which is going to be Venomage. Now, Venomage is desired by most players anyway, no matter where you are in the game, because he is very, very unique and powerful. His A1, he can actually destroy enemy max HP, which is also useful for Scarab and other places in the game, of course, if you cannot kill the boss or they have a ridiculous amount of regen. This is going to be very good, and he can also insta-activate up to 2 poisons. For his A2, he will drop a decreased defense, and he also will drop a decreased attack if they are under a poison debuff. And that's very good because his A3, he has an AoE heal reduction and double poisons, which means this skill, just by Venomage himself, he should be bringing you heal reduction, poisons, decreased attack, decreased defense, destroys targets max HP, and also insta-activating them. That is very, very good from a singular champion, especially that this guy is an epic. He has really high base defense, really high base HP, which makes this champion a very, very good candidate for soloing. And this guy can actually solo Dragon 20 if you build him very well. Then on his passive, he also is just like Tagore. He will bring you a damage reduction. If the enemies are under a heal reduction, they will inflict 15% less damage, which is ridiculously overpowered. This applies on all bosses, by the way. There is no boss that is immune to this, which means you will basically be having a nice 15% damage reduction from everywhere in the game. And lastly, he brings you ally accuracy in all battles by 45. And that is pretty much the Bamboo's 4-leaf code. There might be some other combinations with maybe some other epics and stuff, but this is going to be my final verdict as a 100% free-to-play player. My goodness, man, that is literally the worst code that has came to the game. Maybe I'm just not seeing the potential, but Bamboo's is so trash of a champion. I would never recommend you starting with this guy, especially if it is your first time playing the game. Please do not use Bamboo's. There are so many other codes in the entire game. And I'm not saying this because I hate this code or something. I am not paid by Plarium. I am not sponsored by any company that runs Raid, which means my opinion will literally be 0% bias, and you can expect full transparency from me. This code is so trash. Do not use it. There are so many other codes from other creators or from Plarium themselves, such as one that I use, which starts off with Corvus. You can also use one that starts off with Tuhanarak. You can start off with also a Norma the Return. That is also pretty good. So yeah, there are other champions and a lot more fun legendaries that you can actually try out. And so that is pretty much the end of the video, guys. Make sure you guys do comment down below if you want me to check out some other combinations, or if you guys want to see some other videos. But make sure you guys do leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all in the next video.